I am convinced that half of the Destiny 2 community is actually completely delusional. If you aren't on Twitter, then you've missed some fantastically dumb conversations this week. The Destiny community has been exploding all over 3 words: just get good. This is actually something I've wanted to talk about for a while now. I'm not exactly sure where the conversation picked up and started, but I've seen people like Shadow, Ascendant Nomad, and others voicing their opinions surrounding this common argument. The argument being that in general, a large amount of the player base just doesn't seem to want to improve at Destiny at all. And these are the exact same people that then take to Twitter and complain about the skill gap in the game, wanting things to be easier. Just from what I've seen, I think what started this conversation was a tweet by Separer, which was in response to the recent Trials report of the week, where he basically explained that players shouldn't be entitled to everything in the game, specifically endgame loot like adept weapons, from going flawless in Trials, if they're not good enough to go flawless in Trials in the first place. This makes complete sense, which means naturally for the Destiny community, this started a fucking fire. I'm not going to sit here and go through every single tweet because I don't want this video to drag on, but in general, most of the streamers and content creators who weighed in and put the time into the game to improve themselves share the same opinion, which is that in order to get better at the game, you should get better at the game. Improve by playing more, watching more videos, practicing your movement, and playing harder endgame content. Players, on the other hand, who struggle to complete things like GMs, raids, and go flawless in Trials, think that the game should get easier and cater more towards them. They should become better by essentially nerfing, removing skill gaps, and making top players worse, rather than them going out of their own way to improve or just put more time into the game. This was a bait tweet that unfortunately blew up in the community and had a lot of people agreeing with it. Thinking like this is as delusional as somebody going to work a minimum wage job and after working full-time for like a month, thinking that because they are working full-time and someone else who works full-time at $200K a year are working the same amount, that they too should just be getting $200K a year. It makes no sense. This brings me to the title of the video, which is why this exact argument is hands down Destiny's biggest issue. The bell curve of skill levels in Destiny is atrocious. I mean, in PvE, you are considered the top 10% of players just by having a few raid clears, which means majority of the community struggles to complete even the easiest activities in the game. And the reason this is bad is because these players, for the most part, share the opinion that the game is too hard, which isn't true. They just haven't put any time into actually improving. And since these players make up the majority of the player base, Bungie has started to cater towards them. Now, I get it. As a company that wants to succeed and have their video game be successful, they need to sell their product to more people, and if making the game easy is what sells, then that's what they should be doing. But as part of the community of players myself that actually play the game for more than just the first 2 to 3 weeks each season, and those who are constantly improving so that they can get better and do more endgame content, we get screwed. Realistically, the last time we got a major raid that was actually even somewhat mechanically difficult was Last Wish, and the only mechanics that were hard were the Riven CP mechanics. You ever wonder why Bungie, after 4 entire years, haven't patched cheesing Riven? It's because the raid would literally be impossible for 90% of players to complete. All you have to do for Riven is call out 2 eyes to shoot and use some basic communication to call out where the relic holder should go. The entire boss fight can be summed up to 2 mechanics that monkeys in a lab could probably do, and they're still too hard for most players. As someone who plays the hardest endgame content I can, I'm always forced to make activities more challenging for myself so that I can actually have fun with the game. A perfect example of this is running low man raids, and because that's too easy, as it only requires you to beat each encounter once, I then go and do those low mans flawlessly. Realistically, there's only so many things you can do in this game to make it challenging and actually find enjoyment out of, so the end game ends up getting incredibly boring for players that play the game the most and are the biggest fans and supporters of the franchise. I'm not saying any of this to brag or show off either, but rather to put things in perspective for people. I also think it's very important to highlight that when I started playing this game consistently, which was around Shadowkeep, I was ass cheeks. But I spent time constantly improving and doing harder and harder activities until I got good at the game. It literally just took time and effort, which for some reason people aren't willing to put in anymore. I don't have any natural Destiny talent, and most top players you see probably don't either, they just put in the work. As many people are probably aware, I play a ton of PvE and barely any PvP, which means I suck at PvP. I have never spent more than 50 hours in the Crucible in a single season. I have only ever been flawless a few times, playing with other people that are at or above my skill level, and I certainly could never carry someone by myself to the lighthouse. I have never once farmed for meta PvP weapons and god rolls. I have never once made PvP builds that use the proper mods and subclass setups. Hell, I haven't even spent a single match practicing my positioning, movement, playstyle, or aim. So when I match up against players who have done all of that, or even just a few of these things, and I get shit on, it is what it is. Because those same players probably struggle to get raids and GMs done. You're only ever going to be good at what you practice, and you shouldn't be complaining about how hard something is when you haven't put any effort towards making it easier. Now, most people would still argue that complaining doesn't hurt the game or have any effects, but it definitely does. When double slug swapping was in the meta, for example, tons of players were complaining left and right. Not because it was OP or did way too much damage to bosses, but rather because they were not good enough to hot swap themselves. Players would complain on controller and MNK, and no matter what their situation was, they would make an excuse as to why they couldn't do it, instead of just admitting that they need to practice more and weren't as good as other players who had it down. Players could literally learn this in less than 10 minutes, but they refuse to, because that's not how the game should work, right? If I need to put more effort in than just left clicking, it shouldn't exist. A simple solution to the double slug meta would have been to nerf double slugs and the damage they dealt against bosses, exactly like what went down with Anarchy, but instead, with a mountain of complaints from the community, Bungie decided to remove the skill gap, reducing the separation between good and bad players. Time and time again, the casual player base has complained about things being too hard, and then the game has just kept getting easier. Skill gaps are removed, endgame loot is less valuable, flawless pools limit good players from being able to go flawless as often, just so that less skilled players can actually go flawless for once, and the base PvE experience is constantly less fun to play. Destiny has so much potential in both PvE and PvE that it will never come close to reaching, all because people prefer to complain rather than to just suck it up and improve. If you're watching this video right now and you think I'm wrong and that the game is too hard, then the only thing I have left to say to you is just get good.